Hello, I am Moodida, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is my 1.0 playthrough, where I attempt to load balance all of my factories. Why? Because for some strange reason, this is fun for me. And oh boy, are we going to have some fun in this one. In the last video, I set up modular frames, rotors, and motors. Today, I want to automate the last major iron part, heavy modular frames. Using iron pipe and a few other alternate recipes, I'm able to create these only using iron ingots and concrete. Both I already have in healthy amounts. By the end of the video, I'll have 9 heavy modular frames headed to storage and my dimensional depots. Here is the flowchart for the factory. As you can see, I need 1664 iron ingots and 216 concrete. And that's it. All in all, this really isn't too bad of a factory to put together. And at the end, I'll have 9 heavy modular frames. Thankfully, everything in here is still running smooth, so we can finally move on to the next one. Heavy modular frames. Like the last room, I tried to squeeze it in this area just because that's what's left over here, but it was going to be way too tight of a squeeze. So again, we're just going to go right over here. This is more than enough space. I definitely won't be using all of it. As you probably noticed in the flowchart, by and large, there aren't huge amounts of machines for this recipe, so I'm not going to edit my blueprints ahead of time. Once I get this home base done, I think things are going to start ramping up pretty soon, and I'll be using a lot more machines. Alright, so I just deleted a whole bunch of what I did, because that's what happens when you don't look back at your notes. Alright, so if we take a look at the steel pipe recipe, we need 20 to make 5, or 100 to make 25, right? If we take a look back at the flowchart real quickly, you can see I need 14.72 constructors. Normally, I would place 15, underclock the machines, and we're good to go, right? The problem is with this recipe is the input volume. To make 368 steel pipes, I need 1472 iron ingots. Now, if I did this in 3 sets of 5, that means I'd be putting 490 on each of the belts, and obviously I don't have a belt that can hold that. If I have 4 incoming belts, then I'm fine. So that means I need 16 constructors in total, so I'm going to use 2 of my 8 constructor blueprints. So lock this in place, make sure. What I'm looking for is, let's see, can I ping? Ah, cool. This merger right here has the available input facing to the right, and the next one is going to be facing to the left, so I can join these two really easily if I could have a belt that could handle that much, which I don't, but either way, I want these to be the correct blueprints. Normally, that's what I would do, is I would place a splitter right here in the middle, and I would join the 2 blueprints. Obviously, I don't have a belt that can deal with 1400 iron, so what we're going to do is we're going to split this, just delete these. And the extra belt. And then we can get rid of this splitter down here at the bottom. So now I just need to plug that 368 or whatever it is into here, 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 and here. Let's go ahead and get our recipe set. So we're going to use the steel pipe iron ingots, and easiest way is just to let the machine do the math for me. I need 368, and I'm using 16 machines, so 23 each one. With each machine requiring 92 iron ingots, I need to do a little bit of belt changing here. So all of the input belts need to be marked 2. If those are both 92, that means this is definitely going to need to be marked 3. Change all these lifts and then the connecting belts. That's all the belt work for the inputs anyways. And for the outputs, it's even easier because these are outputting, what was it, 23? 23. So that's 46 onto here, but then two 46s. That means we're gonna need Mark 2 for this one. And I totally forgot to place that merger there in the first place, so I need to edit that blueprint. And there we go. Alright, so that's pretty much the steel pipes done. They're going to a couple different places, so we'll deal with the rest of that later. The next piece I'm going to do is reinforced iron plates, which requires cast screws and iron plates. So let's do the screws and the iron plates here, and then we'll do the reinforced iron plates after that. So let's start with the 4 constructors for the screws. And what I'm going to do with this one, since we're dealing with manufacturers, and instead of the second level being at 3 foundations high, the second level is at 4 foundations. So it means I really can't run the catwalk down the middle like I did in the last room. It just isn't going to work. Instead, I'm going to align all of the factories along with this edge right here, and they'll just kind of go off on that way. And I'll see how I like it. There's a good chance that I'm going to prefer them all being centered, but might as well give it a shot. And right next to the 4, let's go ahead and just place the 5, and then we'll set all these recipes. So lock in place. Let's get rid of that so we can actually see. All right, and we'll just get all the constructors lined up together. Should be enough space. Let's set some recipes. So these are all going to be using cast screw. I need 192 screws, and I'm using 4 machines, so 48 each machine. And for the set of 5, doing iron plates, I need 96 across 5 machines, so 19.2. For the belts, I really don't need to change anything for the inputs for the screws, because in total, this is using 48 iron ingots. The outputs, however, let's take a look. So 48 and 48, so this needs to be Mark II. As far as the plates go, let's take a look. So 28.8, so let's see, that's 30, 30, and 30. So there we go, there's going to be Mark II, which means the other half of that splitter needs to be Mark II, because that's taking it up to the 2nd floor. And that's just it. And then, all right, everything else is fine being Mark 1 there. So if we needed 2 Mark 2s for that splitter, that means this one is going to be Mark 3. To bring it all together, we'll just use the 4 assembler blueprint, and we'll get this very end merger right along with the half of the foundation. And I think that gives me just about 1 foundation right here to work with. That looks good to me. These are using their default reinforced iron plate recipe, and we are going to underclock these to 4 each because I need 16 in total. And that I can do the math all by myself. I'm going to go ahead and make this bottom belts and splitter the ones for the screws, because that's the only one I really need to change. So let's go ahead and edit these. I've got 192 screws going in there, so these need to be Mark II once I split it in half. And after that, everything can be Mark 1. Alright, and I'm just going to do this tiny bit of belt work just because it's so easy. Since screws are going here, plates are going here, let's just set that up real quickly. Alright, so we're going to go, I think, right here. This is what I need. Perfect. Alright, so we got our short little lift here, and this is, let's see, 192, so that's a Mark III. So we get the right lift and belt. Now to bring the iron plates over, I just need a Mark II lift, and we can just have it coming right out there. I think from here, just set it to straight mode. We'll just have it come down right here through the middle, and then into there. And voila, reinforced iron plates done. Next piece of the puzzle is encased industrial beams. I think 1 foundation should be enough. As you can see, we're starting to run out of space already back here, so hopefully that should be good. Let's go ahead and place this one here. I'm going to go ahead and place the very next one also because it needs 8 assemblers. So since I've already got the blueprint out. Alright, so let's set some recipes. So the first set of 8, I'm going to use the encased industrial pipe recipe. I need 30 of these, and we're going to use 8 machines, so 3.75. Think assemblers are my absolute least favorite machine to run across and copy and paste. Alright, so let's take a look at this. Similar amounts for the inputs. In total, I've got 180 and 150 coming in. So just a little bit about work. As a general rule of thumb, to kind of keep things organized and consistent, I generally do the lesser amount on top and the busier belts on the bottom. There isn't really a huge rhyme or reason, except for the top belt would be the slowest belts, and so they would be moving the slowest and easier to see. And that's really the only reason. But sticking with that, that means we're going to put the steel pipes on the bottom and the concrete up on top. This first splitter is splitting it in half. So if we've got 180 and 150, that means after this split, that means these are all going to be Mark II. Same with these lifts. This will be 90 and 75 after that. And thankfully, after that point, it's all Mark Is. So we're good to leave the rest as is. Since we're only making 30, all the outputs are fine. Let's move on to the second set of assemblers. This one we're using the alternate steeled frame recipe, and these are actually all clocked to 100%. I need 24. Yeah, so that's usually what happens to me. Just keep falling in between every single one of them. And these amounts are super low. We're dealing with 16 reinforced iron plates and only 80 steel pipes. So as soon as that 80 gets plugged in, it immediately gets split in half. So that's 40 and 40. We're fine with everything being Mark I. And for the last machines, I need 4 manufacturers. So let's go ahead and get these lined up with everything else. Perfect. Plenty of space there. Looks good. Man, the fact that you can fit 4 manufacturers in a blueprint now is just, oh, it's amazing, isn't it? Alright, so I'm using the heavy encased frame, which is just one of those recipes that I would highly recommend. There's a couple recipes that if you're looking to scale up some of the things for the end game are, in my opinion, just kind of a must-have, and this is one of them. This is just so much of a better recipe than having to use 240 screws per minute for each one. And in general, I think it's more efficient on materials and more efficient on machines and power, since this one only makes 2 a minute, whereas this one makes 2.813. Doesn't seem like a lot, but that's, what, a solid 40% more? Even though that's not how many I'm going to make with each one. So I'm making 9. This took me forever to realize, but when you're doing load balancing, if you can keep it in multiples of the final product, then you're going to end up getting, you know, nice clean numbers for everything else that you choose, right? So I rarely look at this number. I almost always deal with the per minute. But when you're trying to figure out how many to make and all that sort of a thing, if you want round numbers, pick multiples of this end number right here, and it'll just make all of your life just so much easier than trying to deal with these numbers when you're load balancing. So even though I'm using 4 machines, so some of this might not look fantastic. 6, 7.5, 27, 16.5. As you can see, since I have 4 machines, I end up with all round numbers, which sure does beat trying to deal with that sort of a thing. And the beauty of it is all of the belt work for that is done. 24 modular frames, 30 encased industrial beams, 108 steel pipes, and 66 concrete. That means that the steel pipes are going to be the one on the bottom, and that uses 108. But as soon as that gets plugged in, it immediately gets split in half. So that'll need a Mark II, and then everything else inside the blueprint is fine being Mark I. Now that I know the dimensions of the room, I went ahead and added the firewall and the roof. Instead of using this deleted window, let's add the real doorway, and let me show you how I do that. So I like to find more or less the center point. So let's see, we had 10. So let's go ahead and just go back to, okay, so right here is the middle point. So thankfully this is pretty easy. So I am just going to delete everything right here, including the 2 signs. Got my doorway with sign blueprint. Just want the arrow pointing out and make sure everything's lined up. And then we can reconnect these. And I think I decided to change the beams to chrome on this floor. So let's go ahead and change all that. Filter tool is amazing. All right, so that looks good. We can replace that window now. And there we go. That's how I put my doorways in. And then I just can come up here and change my sign. So I abbreviate to HMF, but the game doesn't. There we go. Heavy Modular Frames. And then we just copy it and fly around to the other side. And there we go. All right, so now I want to work on all the belt work within this room, and then we'll deal with the stuff that we need to bring in, because that's the whole thing. All right, so with these, we will figure out where they're coming in. So I'm just gonna do 1 and 2, 1 and 2. And then from up here, we'll just add some floor holes. And these definitely need to be Mark IV lifts. I think 360 something coming in, I think. And then we just need to line those up with the wall holes. All right, so that's the iron pipe inputs eventually dealt with. All right, so the first bit of load balancing, we get to start off nice and easy. Like I've mentioned before, reinforced iron plate, the default recipe is just, it's one of my favorite just because of how simple it is. 1/4 of your iron ingots go to screws, 3/4 of your iron ingots go to the plates. So let's go ahead and just start with a splitter. So I want my final splitter to be right here. I need a little bit more room on that spot, so let's go right there. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Let's see. Actually, let's see, and then that one's there. Okay. I know how we're gonna do this. Okay, so we're actually gonna work basically 1 level off the ground. So that's gonna be the final splitter because I want 1/4 of it to go into there, right? And I'm gonna want to put a merger right on top of here. Cool. So then right before this, there should be plenty of space. So we're going to put 1 more splitter right in front of it. All right, so the initial amount is coming in here. Because the way this is going to end up working is, let's see. Okay, so this took a little bit of trial and error to figure out, but what I'm going to do here is just place a wall hole 2 there. We're going to nudge it to the center. And then what I can do is I can just snap the wall because the next one's still more steel wall, so they clip in just fine to each other. Because I want to use these 2 spots right here. This spot right here is going to get used for some of the steel pipes that are going to come out, and the iron is going to come right here. So this amount of iron is, I think it's like 192. So it's going to come here. Oh, we can stretch that far. Perfect. And then what I'm going to do, so I'm going to go ahead and find my right stubby lift. And yep, that's the orientation I want. So we'll place this right here. Yeah, it looks good. And see 192, so that's Mark 3. And let's go into, just connect those up, and from here to here. Alright, so there's my 192. And then we're going to split this in half. So this is going to go, so Mark 2 into there, and then that one is getting split in half, so there's my 1/4. So the other half of that right there needs to go into this merger. And with my newfound knowledge here, we can place a merger here. Use a Mark 2. Get my short stubby lift in there, and as soon as I save and reload the game, this will no longer have an extra long accordion and it won't be clipping through there. So just until I save and reload, it'll look a little bit funny, but that's okay. It's a much easier way to place those. So added this merger, I've got my 3/4, which is 144, and we can take that and plug it straight into the merger for there. And that goes into the 5-way split for the iron plates. Reinforced iron plates already done. Perfect. Now I need to take the steel pipes and concrete. Alright, so the steel pipes are coming from here in the beginning, and so let's go ahead and grab those. Alright, and we are just going to bring it all together. Alright, so we've got 90 coming from this side and 90 coming from this side. No. So both of these need to be Mark 2. Those needed to be Mark 2 also. Alright, so I've got 368 steel pipes coming out of here. We're just going to bring these down to the ground. So let's get a Mark 4. And let's go for a trip through here. And we'll just run it right along here. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is we are going to use a smart splitter, because there are certain places where they just make life a lot easier. So instead of coming up with a crazy load balancer, because I'm dealing with 368 steel pipes, and then I need to split that between 180 for this process, 80 for the steeled frame, which is the next one, and then 108 for the last one. So instead of coming up with some really weird load balancers, we're just going to make life a little easy. And then we'll just go ahead and place a merger right here, with the priority being the center and the right output overflow to the left. I'm going to do my same trick that I did before, and I'm going to do that split belt speed. So I need a Mark 1 and a Mark 2. But I'm going to go ahead and use a faster belt ahead of both of these, just so if any gaps do show up on the belt, these can make up for it, but it'll still get limited down to the slower speed. And with 60 and 120, here's my 180. And let's go ahead and line this up with this one, and the center, perfect it is. Alright, sure it's facing the right way. The 180 needs Mark 3. And there's the steel pipes for this. Now I had 368 and I just removed 180, so I've got 188 here on the overflow. And we can deal with that here in just a second. We'll just bring that to here. Alright, so the last wall hole is for the concrete. In total, I've got 216 coming in, and that is getting split between 66 for the end process and 150 for this one. And again, I'm just going to use the smart splitter just because with some of these odd numbers, it just makes life a little bit easier. But don't worry, we'll get into some fun, true old school load balancing here soon. Alright, so again, we'll do any to the right in the center, and then overflow to the left. I'm going to do one splitter there, and then we'll do one merger with just a little bit of a gap. Thankfully, yep, no clipping. So to get 150, we're going to do a long stretch of Mark II. We'll do a little bit of Mark III just to make sure that's full. And then we'll do Mark I, and same thing. Just do a bit of Mark II to make sure that's full. So if I take 120, and then I split the 60 in half, that's 30 right there. So there we go, there's our 150. And we're just going to place our merger right on top of here. So we'll create a short lift for here. Delete that and get that one connected. And let's see, let's make sure. So 216 minus 180 with the 120 and the 60. All right, so yeah, only 36 is going to be going through this overflow, so Mark 1 is fine. And we do need to split this in half, so that's 30 and 30. And so here's our 150, here's our 66. So those are the two amounts that I needed. And from here, I can go ahead and just grab a Mark III. And now I've got the concrete to go over to here. And we'll just have it run down. Oh, we need to go one higher. So let's get a Mark III and we'll go 1, 2. From here, we should be fine. Run it back a little bit. There we go. And into the splitter. There we go. Okay, so far not too bad. Let's move on to the next one. For the modular frames, I need to go grab the reinforced iron plate and 80 steel pipes. Alright, so for the steel pipes, I'm going to put a smart splitter here. That'll give me enough room on this side. And then we're going to switch to a regular splitter and then a merger. Put that right there in the corner. Alright, so with this one, we're going to do priority is straight ahead, overflow is to the left. And I want a Mark II, but we are going to make sure that it's nice and full since this isn't a full belt. So that will give me 120 into the splitter. And if I split this all three ways, that's 40 on each belt. So that's 40 and 40. Here's my 80. So we can just grab a Mark II lift and plug that in there. And there's my 80 steel pipes. And now I just need to grab a merger and put that right there on the seam. Alright, so there's the 40. So I had 368. I used 180 for this process. And then that's 120. So only 68 should be coming out of the overflow. But that's still Mark II. So there's the 68 and the 40. So here is my 108 that's going into the very last process. So we can go ahead and just grab Mark II. And plug it right down into the bottom one. Perfect. Now all I need is the reinforced iron plates, which coming in from right over here. So we're just going to go ahead and snake that through here. Just kind of find an open spot. And we'll just bring them down over here. Just going to grab a 2-meter platform because that's the difference in height. And we can just do that. This only needs to be Mark I. And now we can plug this to here. And from here to there. I might clean that up a little bit. But in general, that's how we're going to get it over there. And now we just have the last piece. Alright, so since I like to do this in order, steel pipe is on the bottom. Next one up would be concrete. So let's go find that. Here's our 66 concrete coming out of there. Just, hey, look at that. It's already at the right height that I need. Just bring this all the way down. And there we go. There's the 66 concrete. Next up would be the encased industrial beams. Alright, so let's just go ahead and bring it up to the height that I need it at, which would be right here. This should fit through here just fine. Ah, like a glove. Let's just go ahead and bring this down here. And we'll just bring it up to the right level. And plug it in. And then the last piece is this one right here. So we'll just go ahead and split this. We'll go ahead and just turn this around. Now I do have to replace that lift because it's not connected. Same thing with this belt. So we gotta do that before I forget. And then from here, oh, don't even need to do anything crazy. Just plug that straight in. And there we go, that's all the inputs. So for the output, it's real simple. These are all grouped together. I've only got 9, so mark 1 is totally fine. And then we're just gonna run it down the center of this foundation until we get to the end, and we'll send it on through the tunnel. All right, so the question is, do we have space up here? And the answer is no. Not there anyways. Build that hole, and we'll do it one lower. And then I just need to run this one probably underneath that one right there, and we'll go all the way down and then into storage. Believe it or not, doing all of this wasn't the hardest part. So the next part is doing the load balancing for the belts. And for that I need some new blueprints. Well, if you're like me and feel like this just isn't busy enough, you are in for a treat. So I'm up here at the top just because I haven't dedicated a room for the blueprinters. In hindsight, all of my rooms are basically the full height of the blueprinter. So when you take into consideration the fact that they come up like a meter, I didn't really design this factory to fit one of these in here easily, so I'm gonna have to figure that out eventually. I would like a dedicated room, especially when I have the hover pack. It'll just be really nice. But for now, I'll just throw it on the roof. So I need a couple new load balancers. First one is gonna be really easy, so let's knock that one out of the way. For concrete, I have a 270 line available, but I need 216. So 216 out of the 270 is 0.8, which is 4/5. So this is a relatively easy one to put together. Well, let's go ahead and start with a merger, and then that's going to go right into a splitter. This splitter is going to split it in half, and then from there we need one more splitter. I'm going to set this up with the correct belts. So since I have a full Mark III belt coming in, that means I actually need a Mark IV belt for this connection right here. Because the way this works is when you split it 5 ways, you're splitting it 6 ways, and you're cycling one of them back. But because of that, and it'll increase a couple times after the first couple cycles, this needs to be able to hold 20% more than what you're plugging in. So I need a belt that holds 324. So thankfully Mark IV, plenty. All right, and then this splitter splits it in half. We'll go ahead and use a Mark III. And for the other half, we're going to go ahead and put a merger on top. Go ahead and place a temporary merger right here, just so I can get this connection. So we're going to use a Mark III, and then I'm going to delete the merger, and we're going to plug that in right there. So this is half. With the other half, we go into here, and we need to use all 3 outputs. But one of those outputs needs to go ahead and cycle back to the merger. So now I've got basically 3/5 here, and then these 2/5. So we'll go ahead and just place a lift there. That leaves me with 1/5 here and my 4/5 here. With concrete out of the way, let's move on to iron. For the 2 different things I need, so let's deal with the smaller one first. I need 192 for the reinforced iron plates. And since my belts are 300.64, and if you're like me, I just threw it in Google to find the simplified fraction. So 16/25. And there it is. Since this and the next blueprint are a little bit more involved, I'm just going to try to run through it and give the broad overview. And I'm going to make a couple tips and tricks videos on the other playlist to kind of go a little bit more in depth on some of these more complicated splits. Alright, just for a real quick refresher, for a 5-way split, we've got a merger that goes into a splitter, and then that's going to go into 2 more splitters. This right here is your initial amount that you're plugging in. This belt right here needs to be able to hold this plus 20%. And I'll show you why. We immediately split it in half. So half goes here, half goes here. And we've got 1, 2. There's our 5, but with the 6th one, we loop it back to the merger. And that's why this needs to be able to hold that extra 20%. But this will split this incoming belt into 5 equal belts. So since I'm working with 25ths, I'm doing a 5-way split, and then just with one of those, I need to do another 5-way split. So we have the initial amount goes into the splitter. This is the splitter that splits it in half, so half of it is going here. So this right here is 3/5 or 15/25, right? And then the other half is plugging into this splitter. Now this splitter, we needed to use all 3 of the outputs. So one of them is cycling back into the merger right there. One of them is going up into this merger, and the other one is going into that merger. So that right there is 1/5 or 5/25. This one right here is going into the merger, and we're immediately doing another 5-way split. So we're taking this one and we're going into here to this splitter. Now this splitter is the one that's splitting it in half. It's that one right there. So half of it is going into this one. The other half goes into that splitter. So here we have the bit that cycles back into the merger, which would make this the 3/5, or since it's 3/5 of 1/5, this is 3/25. I'm sorry if this is getting super confusing. So that right there is the 3 and then 5. So we've got 8/25. And then the last one is coming from this splitter. So we needed to split this all 3 ways. That one's going to the merger. This one's going to this merger. So here is our 9/25. And then the very last one is coming down into this merger. So here we have our 16/25 and our 9/25. That wasn't too bad, right? So the last one took care of all of the iron ingots that I'm going to need for the reinforced iron plates. Now let's figure out the iron pipes, which is the bulk of the iron. I need 1472, and I have 300 lines. So I basically need 5 belts, but not 5 completely full belts. 1472 minus 1200, because that would be the 4 belts. I need 4 full belts and then a 272 belt. So 272 out of 300. You know, off the top of my head, this one didn't really ring a bell, so I did throw it in Google, and the simplified version is, oh goody, 68/75. Alright, so this one started to get a little bit busier, and I needed to give myself a few more labels. So the input is right here, and then, yeah. So the principle is basically the same as last time. Last time I did it into 25ths, which is basically just taking one of these 5ths and then doing another 5-way split. I just needed to do a 3-way split before that, and then do the 5-way, and then do one more 5-way. Boy, is this ridiculous. Alright, so like I mentioned, we've got a 3-way split to start. So if we think of this as the final, so 2/3 go there, or 50/75. And then we've got this one that goes into the merger. So this one does the 5-way split. And that's where things get a little bit messier. And then, yeah, and then we do another 5-way split, and this definitely isn't my favorite thing to do, but I think I got to a certain point and decided I really didn't want to try rebuilding it, because these are really fun for me to make, but it does require just like all of my brain power. And so once I got to a certain point and realized that these were going to be right next to each other, I just said, screw it. I didn't want to redo it. So hopefully this works and I don't need to make any changes. But right here we have our 7/75ths. And out of this one we have our 68/75ths. Or the 272 I'm looking for. Alright, so that gives me the 272 plus the 4 full belts, but now I need to condense that into 4 equal belts. And this is what I came up with. So there may well be more compact ways to do this. This is just the way I laid it out, so it made sense to me. I've got 5 incoming belts, and then what I'm doing is basically splitting them all into fourths. So this level right here is going from 1 belt and then splitting it in half and then splitting it in half. So I'm getting 4 equal parts of each of the incoming belts. And then I'm basically just plopping down a merger. I'm grabbing the first 3. So this one, so this is the bottom one. The second one is just going into the lift right there. And then the third level is going into this one. And then that feeds into another merger that's grabbing the 4th and 5th belt. So I'm getting 1 from each stack, and I'm doing that all 4 times. So I'm taking 5 belts and then turning it into 4 belts. And I think this is my actual first load balancer I've done at the save, instead of just, you know, random ratio splits of a single belt into 2 different ones. This is what you would traditionally call a load balancer, because I can take 5 completely different amounts and it'll spit out 4 completely equal belts. So in the last one, or the one before it, I added some frame floors, and I am probably going to extend this to whatever wall finally gets built so that it looks more supported and makes sense. But because I need so much space for what I'm about to add, I felt like it was going to look really weird if it was all frame floors and then I added that gigantic blueprint that I just made on top. So what I'm going to do is just grab some 4-meter foundations. I think if I go up 2, I'm going to use metal because I like the way that it looks. So let's see, is this high enough? Oh, perfect. So that'll give me just enough clearance. So I'm going to place a bunch of these so that I've got a place to do all of this extra load balancing that I need. I went ahead and finally added the end of the hallway here. So now if we come out to here, we've got a little bit more stuff going on. So as you can see, we've got our 16/25 blueprint there. Got the 5/4 load balancer. And then lastly, the 68/75. So this is going to bring up a 300 belt from down below, and it's going to plug in right here. The last bit, or the smaller bit, the 7/75, is going to come down here and into this merger, and that's going to get sunk. And so that's why I added, it's sinking 10 right now, but it will be 28. And so that was just my way of remembering that. And then the 68/75, so that 272 is coming out right up here, and it's getting plugged into the very top. And then we've just got 4 normal belts that are coming up from down here below. So we'll just get those connected, and that'll get that started. And then lastly, this is the last belt. That one's getting plugged up into here. And this will split out my, I think it's 192 that I need for the reinforced iron plates. And then the last bit of that will end up getting sunk down here. With the power of blueprints, you can take what seems like just a awful task to undertake, and you can break it up into some pretty easy parts that now in the future, if I need to use, I've got them. I sure hope I don't have to deal with 6875ths too many times though. Just a quick stop over here to say hi to Bert and Al. Wow, that's not great. Thanks, guys. Alright, and down here at concrete, let me show you what I've done. So all I need to do is connect this belt to that lift. And that'll get my 1/5 and 4/5 blueprint going. Sending the 4/5, which is 216, down onto that belt, and then it'll go up into the factory. And then this will trickle down to a tiny bit, so I could change this to a Mark 1 or something afterwards if I wanted to. But that's all we need to do to get this started. And now everything in here has power. And I did my same old thing with all the beams to run the power along and kind of help give these second layers a little bit more support. I haven't quite figured out how I want to do lighting in here. The manufacturers are so tall, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. Still need to figure that out. It's that time. So I'm going to run down to the concrete, get that started, and then we'll go over to the iron, get that all plugged in, and watch it all come to life. Let's get this connected and start the stopwatch. And here are the first ones. They needed to cycle on and off a couple times, but it looks like they're staying on at 100% now. So that is 9 heavy modular frames per minute headed to my storage and the good old dimensional depot. I'm going to let this run for a little bit longer just to make sure there's no hiccups. So in the meantime, I've got another little side project to show you. At the end of the last video, I cleaned up my temporary starter factory, and I had forgotten just how many Somersloops I threw in a lot of those things. Like the steel beams, the encased industrial beams just weren't quite enough to keep up with demands, and so I Somerslooped them. And I forgot about it, and now that I have them back, I was able to add a second alien augmenter. So, kind of helps out the power grid, and they just look cool. I've let them run for a little bit now, and everything seems to be staying on at 100%, so it looks like we are good, and that is mission complete. So that's 9 heavy modular frames per minute headed on to the storage, and my lovely dimensional depots. And that's going to do it for this one. I only have a few more parts to automate before I advance to the next tier, and most of them are electronics. But before I get to that, I need to automate a few more things, and I'm going to need to take a trip back out to my oil fields in the next video. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.